It's not fun to be a slave to your impulses or be compulsively dangerous to yourself. Just as like a small example, like when you're kind of like doing things that don't mean anything. Basically, what I'm saying is that even though in the story the Egyptians have the Israelites enslaved and they're putting a demand on the Israelites that's unrealistic and making life not so fun for the Israelites, and even though for that point in time they have this physical authority over them, they kind of have this militaristic grip on this culture that is a part of them, but not them exactly. They have differences, but are living together. But it ends up being a God that's kind of outside of both of them, but one is associating with this God, wanting to worship it, while the other is in disagreement of that God. Now it ends up being that God which kills all of the firstborns, but the thing is it wasn't gonna kill all those firstborns if the Egyptians did what the Israelites did by putting something on their door. Then they wouldn't have been visited and they would have been saved. So even though these Israelites are the ones that are under this military authority, they end up knowing what to do to prevent their firstborns being killed. And if the Egyptians had a little more respect, because they might be thinking that because they have physical power over these Israelites, that the Israelites don't know anything, even though the Israelites aren't being affected by these kind of events and plagues and these things that are happening, which the Egyptians aren't prepared for and don't know what to do for it, and they're not able to predict or prophesize that it's even going to happen. They don't really understand how aspects of nature or the creator of all life around them is affecting them. And so it's kind of like the masculine and feminine, or even like just a male and female relationship, which is kind of a large part of the canon, is that there's this male and female relationship that starts it off. Before it even becomes all of these other things that it's talking about, all of these other stories, well, it starts off with this male and female relationship. And then even besides your own personal take on the canon, it's kind of something that's just like a current hot button. And it seems like stuff that's current hot buttons are things that are kind of put for solving on a whole. And I don't see life as a chessboard where people are pawns on it. In fact, I've seen life for a while now as a cooperative adventure puzzle game. I like that. I like those healthy items. When I've been healthier in my life, I felt bad in my gut for watching Game of Thrones. Even for buying processed kale chips and kombucha, I felt bad. Because as I get healthier and was making healthier choices, my gut was able to help me make healthier choices. And I would still continue at all levels fighting against my gut. So even when I had stopped porn and I had stopped soda, well, then my gut started becoming sensitive to kombucha, and even the financial decision of kombucha, which I was like in my head even justifying, what do you mean? It's healthy, it's fine, I can get it. Why, gut, do you make me feel like this thing I want to do is wrong? It's not porn, it's Game of Thrones. It's like popular, it's important, it should be watchable. Even though Game of Thrones didn't give me any healthy mental states. And to think that you need to consume everything to have an awareness that's healthy is this kind of false justification that is a product of this addiction. Because I've been addicted to porn and soda so many times, and I've escaped it. But then it wasn't a permanent escape, and I went back. There's been so many times it's felt like I've been right there at the promised land and then have fallen in the wilderness. Now I'm still alive, but I don't have a good predictor of future events. I don't navigate things correctly. And I am in this kind of hurricane, tornado type of spiral between these two types of behaviors, where there's this kind of balance and fight between Israel and Egypt. And these are just kind of word placers that aren't really enough on their own to navigate these personal landscapes of life, you know. And I have so much about the depth and importance of healthy root systems for your relationship, so your connectivity is strong and healthy and your organs function. But besides all of the permanency or all of the depths that could have happened from past actions, it's still even currently so possible for me to make decisions that make me feel like a completely new human in just the span of 2 weeks. Now, even though I could feel like that, well, part of me has an unhealthy attitude for the future of my life currently, because I'm so dwelled on the past that it creates kind of some of the similar behaviors that lead to those addictive patterns. Because I won't move forward into those 2 weeks because I'll be so fixated on what could have been or what could have happened, even though that doesn't serve a transformative boost. I really underestimate good changes that can still occur now in 2 weeks and what it is that produces those good changes. I still am in such a negative mindset. I avoid this growth mindset, and it's complicated for me to even try to understand or process what it is that causes me to think of things the way that I think of them. Because I don't solve things that great. I feel strange about work and being in the same place for an amount of time, being able to aim and construct myself, being able to appreciate or understand what opportunities are still available to me now that I'm not seeing, what it is that I should be working on now, and how to do better with what I have, even going forward, and recognizing what kind of change is possible with what I have going forward, and not taking it for granted or underestimating it, or having this kind of mindset that's too dictative on what it is that I'm able to do. Just being so talkative and so much in word and not action that I don't make any of these great changes, and think that all of these caffeinated productivity spurts I'm doing are not actually helping at all, but are more unhealth, is just furthering a descent of mine, a maddening expression with this kind of false positivity and the declarative of it, where you're speaking a bunch of nonsense that's kind of out of order with this idea or vibe that it has some type of benefit or health. Now, I'll have to say that I've made videos like this before and I didn't upload them, even though I wish that I did upload them. And I wish that I had messaged people on Facebook, or connected to people on Facebook, or looked through people's Facebook and messaged them, and was just otherwise more social, more interested in others, more interested in them, and more interested in uploading myself what it is that I'm doing. Things that I was doing, I think that I wish that I had uploaded it more often as kind of a practice or something that was regular or normalized to get that kind of community feedback, or to get the kind of practice or regular practice where you're kind of used to the action or upload. Kind of understanding that what media is, or the way that it connects or binds us or changes us or chains us together and connects us, is kind of evolving and different, and that there's this kind of anatomic functionality besides what it is in this kind of performative mindset, or what it is or how it is that kind of intelligence develops, and what it is that intelligence is developing for, and the point of it, because it's been the Word that's given me kind of different contexts for different medias and stuff that on its own is kind of disconnected or doesn't have as much meaning, but then when it's about the Word, starts to have this connective meaning within it. And I don't have a shield for myself or any kind of protective, kind of absorbent practices that help me to absorb the kind of dark forces which are holding me in these kind of addictive grasps that I'm struggling so much to escape from, and that I'm not really understanding how it is that I'm supposed to kind of go into the wilderness or across the desert and continue in worship and sacrifice and atonement, up to the cloud, giving of myself what I can, so that I'm getting blessings and returns, and I'm not kind of stuck down being in disfavor or in the curse of a God that is wanting to guide me and purpose me, and all I have in my head is this kind of authoritative whip to try to force myself into the brick making, or that I am going through a desert or a wilderness, but I'm just constantly disobeying the rules and commands that are being set before me, and I won't allow myself to participate in the obedience of this worship, and because maybe I'm lost in that worship. Maybe I have this generational trauma or generational deviation from the Word, where even if there was a start, it wasn't passed down exactly, or wasn't continued being passed down, and that it wasn't something that was supposed to be stopped, and that it was stuff that is still relevant and has complete relationship to the present moment in the now of time that's happening, and that it's a daily development, and that the failures you've experienced kind of give you not the greatest strength and potential abilities that would have come from a continued obedience and discipline to the positivities and practices that work, but at least give you some kind of motivation to change and participate into the structure of what you have available to you now, which is not the transformative super strength that it could have been, and instead is kind of like a weak thing. But even that weak thing can still become stronger than you realize in the span of 2 weeks. Not as much as you could have done had you stayed on it always. And sometimes that exact feeling is what makes you think or feel that you can't do it at all. That with that feeling, there is not even a 2 weeks of progress, and there's definitely not a lifetime of progress. Kind of the projection of your life, or what's left of it, has no grasp or hold on any kind of anticipated positive progress, so that it's hard to know what to do within your situation to make any kind of forward action movement. And it's been these kinds of things in the past that have kind of prevented me from starting, but I've started on things before that I didn't know would lead to such positive growth, when I had a similar feeling of wasted potential and time on the smaller scale, not realizing the scale of what I existed on currently. Even now, my dad, who's like 60 or something, will be like, oh, it's too late for me to stop drinking or stop smoking. I'm kind of already on that path anyways. And it's like, no, you're not. Even people that are very old, it's not like they're just about to drop off. It's like it really is dependent on their continued behavior, and things can be kind of stopped or kind of put on hold or pause, but that socially it would take some kind of influential factor to make that reach or make that kind of stop. And that without that kind of reach or stop, it wouldn't get there. The resource necessary for the change isn't going to arrive, because, even biblically, a lot of the times it's these prophets or people that are listening who have had a lifetime of listening or training. Daniel was someone that was put in a place where he was learning all of that. Like he studied the literature. He had a lifetime of studying the literature and symbolic meanings, kind of like Carl Jung or Jordan Peterson, where they spend a lifetime studying patterns, and their worship of God is just them putting into action kind of a belief system based on their life, which was one that put them in a position to study patterns and act on them, and they've done so. And so then there's that type of person that exists and brings us messages and kind of accumulates messages and becomes voices around us, and they don't always have the best lives. And it's not like just because they're in a book that's lasted so long that all of a sudden you have this kind of evolutionary truth where you grab hold of it and say, because of the longevity or because of the popularity, because I see it happening in my own life, that I can kind of ignore everything else happening and just have this kind of blind belief and trust in this thing to fall back on. And instead, it's this kind of daily practice where you just see things around you change the more you dip your toes into this kind of pool or reservoir or source, where kind of the nature of the word itself takes different shapes and kind of makes these pathological changes in your own life, which just reorient your perspective on what it is that life even is that you're part of. And so instead of being kind of in these addictive kind of unaware fogs where you just need to get to these different things or you're stuck in these different places, instead the life or the shape of the connectivity of all things becomes this kind of ever-evolving awareness within you, kind of in a relationship with that other. And the more kind of it seems that you have a relationship with that other, the more it seems like you're given purpose and task, and that when you participate in that purpose or task, well, your life itself is rewarded and there's more blessings than there is curses. And so naturally you become wired to participate. You become wired to be part of that kind of orchestration. And it's natural too that during this whole process you still have all of these kind of fatty tissues all over yourself, and you have a lacking of strength and energy, and these cognitive dissonances, and all of these lacks of developments and gaps in relationships. And it sucks you're older, so your chance to really be a sponge or make it through the mythological trials at the right age aren't really there. And you have all of these kind of deviations which create borders and boundaries and parameters of resistant kind of magnetic forces alongside already the current habitual states that you find yourself in, or your current kind of behavioral reactions to whatever are the default triggers and stimulants or stagnative forces that you're having trouble resisting or finding the kind of the resource to resist, and you kind of aren't able to get out of that grasp. And even when you do, you seem to die repeatedly over and over again and just have this real dystopian, pessimistic, or nihilistic view on your own personal life. Not to say life as a whole, or that life as a whole is the same for everyone, but instead is this kind of reward and treat and train and consequence and pattern. But that undeniably in your own personal life, or for me specifically, the word has such an effect on not only the future and the present, but also on how your memory is in perception of the past and time, of the blueprint and the expression of your own personal life, of a total story and your story within that story, of the mechanics and the emotional implications of the mechanics, of the design and the meaning and the energy and the sensories and the relationships and what they mean to you as an individual personally, but then how that personal experience helps you understand other personal experiences to create these positive feedback loops of growth and these kind of redemption arcs and these restorative patterns, and this pattern that makes a new kind of card deck of optimism and constantly gives you new weaponry and new machinery, new technology and innovation, new immunities, new cures, new solutions, new formulas that kind of help you and allow you to progress and make the products which move you forward, where life becomes new patterns, new sound patterns, new connective patterns, new patterns and new algorithms you didn't know existed, where the cars, the transportation, the walks, the steps, the parks, the books, the people, the conversation, the sounds, the depth, the growth, the rigidity goes away and you have a belief in plasticity and start to see it again. The stuff you thought was negative becomes bedrock or soil or foundation for the next season. The harvest gets better each time, and the mistakes and the failures become the things that give meaning to what's next. There's even a belief that kind of develops of the eternality of life, the continuance after death, the ongoingness, which kind of motivates you to just participate to the overall positive good because it rewards you to, like life itself, God itself, the word itself as a message, rewards you for this development and contribution, for the things that are happening around you, that when you help and strengthen yourself, it gives you the ability to help what's around you and becomes part of this rewarding positive feedback loop and cycle, which changes how you think about everything and changes how you think about everything in a way that motivates you to continue looking and searching and knocking and seeking and being bold and brave and courageous to yourself, being stronger than the entropy, the gravity, starting to push again and resist above the inflammation, above injury, above the feeling of destitution, above the feeling of deprivation, above the feeling of just word or talk only, but to be motivated to begin life again in action, and that it isn't again or not even a reborning, but it is in fact just the continuance of development and training, where there was a stop, there was stagnation, you got still watered. It was gross and septic and disease ran rampant and suddenly leeches and mosquitoes were all around you. Your ecosystem was starting to grow full of weeds and the garden was unkempt and unkept. There was not things in the storage or the cellars for the winters and the summers was famine, and you're feeling the experiences of the curses and the pestilence, the fires, the sword and the famine, how other people will be used against you, and for 40 years you'll be under generational curses. You'll be under the rule of foreign people that do not treat you correctly or respectfully, and all you ever hope to gain or have of your life is no longer yours but to be taken and stolen. You're on the wrong side of Christ, the wrong side of the word, the wrong side of all aspects of society, and there's no good to which you're serving. You're just completely in this wicked state, and all it is fear and destitution, and that's what you're part of, and it feels like that's what will continue. But the word and the behavior of the word continues to change. Even when you're alone, it feels like all you have is these machines or tools and devices. The word still changes you because you look at it and it just makes you think or connects to things that you didn't think about that have kind of been there all along, to where stuff you thought was isolated or by itself that you were partaking in was part of a connective relationship to this word all along, just like your life too from the beginning, and others as well as you see it. And it's hard to know how to connect that to everything else that is going on, because for me it's just the personal relationship that I'm having with these practices that I've been introduced to and involved with. Because basically in my life there's been these positive practices introduced to me, but those positive practices kind of had that feeling where it's like life as a design is like, hey, you want to grow and do better and continue, then you have to kind of shake off your ego, or this feeling that you cannot act and gather for yourself. And if you push yourself out of bounds to change and do this thing, which it takes change, because who you are now as a default won't rise up and do it. So if you rise up and do it, then you make the action that changes the character who you are and becomes the type of person who does those positive things that others introduce, which you aren't willing to do, but you make the changes to do it. And so there's that feeling, but there's the feeling too of being the negative one, where all of those positive ones that were introduced you did not do, and the negative ones you did do, but it doesn't feel completely fair, like you completely had the opportunity to. And at the same time, in the present moment, it's like God the Force wants you to gain wisdom and understand fear of what happens when you don't do it, and that even though you're late, you can still provide value or positivity, and that it's not completely over, and that only through the word can you train and become who you were not before, to not take all negativity at face value for granted and just apply it to yourself and give up and say that's what you are, but that you have a belief in continuance and restoration and solution, and that it's not all over because of the destruction that it seems it is, but can be rebuilt. And that perhaps that's what you do with your life at these different stages and points, that all years of life and all areas of life have this importance that can grow and become better and don't have to get worse. And that's what I feel like I have. I don't know. It does change, but talking to yourself out loud isn't fun, like having friends and family that you're interacting with. You know, the hour slots don't feel so good. And unexpectedly, I get into conversations that are suddenly meaningful and impactful and become relationships I'd love to see continue and develop, that I can look forward to, that I wasn't expecting to have. But then suddenly, I'm like, wow, this is great. Even though they're not relationships that are like years of development, things change in ways that I don't expect when I decide to do the positive stuff anyways. And sometimes the positive stuff seems to be making these kinds of videos. Even though I doubt it, I've doubted it so many times before, for things as simple as going to the gym, things as simple as cooking eggs, things as simple as putting a water glass by the bed, things as simple as these habits and practices that are life-changing, not only for yourself, but for everything around you, like your entire perspective, the relationships and people, the mechanics and design, the path of life that you take, and the criticalness of the years, all of them, and how much compounding fruit makes a difference, how important that tree of life is from the very beginning, that it's not something to be taken for granted. And the camera and recording and energy and the cloud is so important going forward, and the whole time it's been. I'm not the only one that's deviated. I'm not the only one that hasn't done things. It's everyone wanting to be contributing to this positive force and be developing and influencing and having a life that lasts forever, being able to go again in a world where you contributed to the bettering of it, and then you get to go again and start over in some kind of soul way, where there's a life beyond that allows you to go again and have another life in a world after, where you don't just do it once. You've been doing it forever since the beginning, and it's a constant growing state, and you do get to go again and have a new life. And it's not just blackness and darkness when it's over. That where we are with dreams and relationships and connectivity, not only to us but to ourselves and with everything that's going on, is part of this infinite continuum, part of this cool experience. And when you talk about it and make it more real and more alive, it becomes something you're saying that's being present and new in the moment, something that's kind of tethering you and connecting you to what's going on, so that you can be guided and put in a situation where you won't be stuck in the addictive traps, but will be part of the kind of forward moving progresses, where you have something that you're willing to put in a time box because it's time oriented, because it was so hard to find kind of ground or any kind of grounding mechanism or device, even though you were looking one, but you're just like a straggling little energy cell that felt these little magnetic tethers and grasps and little glimpses of this life force trying to pull you in, but you wouldn't listen to it or kind of connect with it. You wouldn't clasp yourself with it. You wouldn't kind of joystick or press the buttons. But then at the same time, there's all these kind of values and like ethical principles and these kind of mythological trials or tests or ways to contextualize and kind of classify all of these kind of clusters of feelings that you've had, and kind of all of this intelligence perceptible that you can process. But that as you're trying to understand all of this, you're like, what an idiot, because none of this is applicable in the moment, and you have so much that's shown you that this wasn't totally bad and was actually pretty okay while you were studying, but that you needed to be doing the studying aspect too. You needed to be doing church as well, music as well, learning as well, all of it together, but that these kinds of videos wouldn't exactly be a bad or terrible thing, and that actually they were a huge part of the learning for life itself. There's something that was current and was happening and wasn't totally separated or isolated or divided or cut off or severed from the whole of what was happening, because you would kind of get stuck in this modality of doing something that was a bit maybe non-functioning or wasn't the growth that you were able to actually do sustainably, and you couldn't find out why or what the reason was. So it's like this ongoing talk and conversation that wasn't really effective when you had this device to just kind of turn it on and start recording yourself and filming and talk about something that you give a title to and some context to, and put it in a place that is like this overbearing father trying to create kind of these educational learning facilities to help develop us, because they don't want to lose people that they feel responsible for, even if they're not the direct biological parent, because a lot of the times the direct biological parents are able to produce and create life in another human that they are responsible for, but they're not always aware of their kind of interconnectivity to the whole that's going on. And others that aren't able to constantly biologically reproduce do feel a sense of responsibility for everyone of all ages, because they have this type of kind of tribe loyalty aspect and feeling, and this kind of want and desire to grow stronger in that area, not knowing whether or not that's a good thing, or how big the structure that you have should be, and what that means, and kind of what it is that satisfies or helps you grow, or what that kind of growth looks like, or what you're looking for. But that when you say these kinds of things, it does feel like somebody out there is wanting you to develop in this way and wishes that you had the whole time, but also has to keep going, and they want you to keep acting because they don't want you to get stuck in traps anymore, because they care about you and they love you, and they love you in a way that happens when you experience growth in a sustained manner, and you want that for others, and you don't want them to have obstacles, because when you start growing in a sustained way, you start growing in a sustained way that allows others to grow in a sustained way, but you also notice and see at the parameters and the boundaries and the borders that there's others too you wish could grow in sustained ways, but you don't really know how to reach them or help guide them in a way that allows them to grow in a positive, healthy manner, without giving them energy for corruption or devastation or destruction, or the kind of components and abilities that are just going to hurt others, and or won't help others. Because if some had authority for some means, they would just use it for a way that hurts people. And so you're not only having to find out how to sustain growth, but how to not be in that place where if you had any kind of power, it would be mismanaged or misused in a way that is threatening, so that you can't really be let off the hook because you're a loose end at that point and you're not really trusted with any kind of authority or responsibility over structures that involve others, which they are in the care of. And so this kind of loving force is really like a big protective force as well. And this big protective force still seems to be coming from more than just people itself, but as like this like big protective force that seems to come from love is also a love that doesn't seem to happen until you start becoming healthier, because it's like the protective force or the ability to protect comes from this love that's something that you don't even instantiate or think about or have the capabilities, because it's the addiction too and the pressure for the addiction that ends up making a lot of the choices that will hurt others, because you're weak to your cravings and impulses and you don't have control over yourself, even though the engagement of learning, the heroic path, the positivity, that path of love is so much better than the pleasure you would feel like you need to get. But it can be really difficult to find that kind of magnetic pathway or that drive towards the right positive forces of life, which seem so desperately to want to transform those who aren't even really aware of the existence, and that all of these stories are not as much for just pure condemnation, but are truly trying to kind of analyze and diagnose, solve, cure these diseases and pathways, because everyone was a baby at some point or a life at some point, and there is this kind of empathetic shield around the world that's like wanting to kind of have this love, and it's hard to know at what point love is a weakness, or how far the protective hand or parenting hand should reach, or at what point is it an individual versus the kind of design or blueprint or creator of that kind of reaching in and giving a hand, and how much really is there invested in what we're doing here. As me personally, because I can only talk for me as a person who is understanding himself through the lens and perspective of everything around me, through my personal experiences, which confound me, through my personal experiences, which don't have as much depth or root as I wish they did, but all I do is just talk out in this open air draft, and suddenly I don't do as much scrolling or things that I wish I wasn't as I am when I'm doing this, it seems or feels like, and it becomes, it becomes tiring and exhausting. I don't have a practice or a habit, but you have coffee and you have caffeine, and suddenly you're just talking about all of this and that and stuff. So you're like, well, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of a weird situation. But you spin around in circles because your muscles are out of alignment, and you're not going to the gym because you're not doing the planner. When you did the planner once, you went because you had resources and people and you neglected it, so suddenly you're on your own. It feels like it's eating and consuming you and taking you down more than it's helping you and supporting you and lifting you up. But I have a water bottle, so I can drink water, and you drink water and you feel better, and you really don't realize what can happen in 2 weeks, because I'm going to be honest, there really is, as much as I keep being wrong about sex, semen retention, and relationships, at the times that I have been by myself and disconnected from that relationship, which it seems like was the spirit and the bride, and then I'm failing by not being part of it because it was about that male and female connection. But even that I keep being wrong about too, in a way that once expressed becomes a kind of truth, because when I'm by myself in that room, when I'm back home, I stay there and I don't go anywhere. I keep watching porn and coming, all right? It just keeps being that, and it's like destroying my life. And when I don't come, when I don't watch porn, when I don't scroll, life becomes better. It becomes better. All my relationships become better, and I struggle to do what's necessary to maintain that velocity and position because I lose it. And it is these types of things, like making a video, recording and talking, which didn't happen naturally, and it's so hard to find. It's so hard to have the want, the discipline, the control, the habitat, the environment, the influence, the factor, the push, the person, the thing, the belief, the justification, the argument, rationalization, or the reason. even the evidence or the successful experimentation that can actually connect this to the solution or result that says, oh, you're not taxing the system. Oh, you're not just becoming more compulsive and impulsive. Oh, you're not being the destroyer through your complaints and ventilations. Oh, you're not being in a prey. You're making a public spectacle of yourself. You're doing something socially dangerous. This isn't the way you get control of yourself. You're just talking out loud. You're not actually helping anything. You're not producing stuff within a course or a guided area in a way where it's not destructive. You're putting yourself on a platform that's just going to get you annihilated. You're not really thinking about what it is that you're saying. You're not being precise in your speech or your action. You're just being kind of a youthful kind of, I'm just going to say everything and hope it's expressed correctly. And you're not saying something that you agree with because you put it and polished it and you got the chaff away and you did the essay and you did it correctly and you have structure to what you're saying. It's not just a bunch of randomness, because when you do the random compulsive impulse stuff, it's something that ends up destroying you. But I'm also getting to these points because of my bad habits, and I'm getting into bad habits because of cycles of bad habits, because I've gotten into waves and dips of good practices and good things, and then got out of those good things by not doing things that were protecting me from the bad things. I wasn't able to get to those protective forces. I was in and out of good and protective forces, and now it's like I've lost the protective forces, and that they were supposed to be combined. These protective forces were supposed to be combined with those other forces, and now I don't have those other forces. So I'm lacking a balance in these areas that protect from themselves, and I'm not completely wrong or completely right, but was completely right at different points in time and positions and different points of space-time. And so now you have this like video, and you're watching this video kind of thing, and you're saying this video kind of thing, and in that video kind of thing or that video context, it's like you are right about it, but the dark forces that you were up against required more in order to beat and sustain them. And even if you feel like you are fighting dark forces around you, within you, trying to corrupt and addict you, corrupting and addicting those around you who are not strong enough against it, or don't have a belief in you, or don't have a belief in your reputation or restoration, or don't really have kind of this foundation or fundamentalism for this like spiritual positivity or a love of God, these like children of God, or what that means, that you're cut off, you've deviated too far, you're isolated, you're out of the children of God in the community, you're in the wilderness and you died, you didn't follow Moses' law or Joshua after that and make it to the promised land, and you didn't even do your own personal mythological archetype, heroic, transformative mythological journey that is a reflection of that past canonical story, but within the shape of where it is that you live now generationally, where you live now in the orbit of the earth around the sun that you're in, and that no amount of words can help you intellectualize this state that you're stuck in and unable to get out of. And the stories are not just metaphors or shapes and patterns to help you kind of reverse or traverse where it is that you're aiming the cannon, launching the projectile of your future anticipated, but instead is like a condemnation and a permanent sentence upon you, where you're not able to make any kind of positive changes, and your life is meaningless. And that seems like it is on one case, and on the other case it seems like there's all this new literature coming out based on the word, and new games and things that were important the whole time, and you can lose something and then get it back, and you can feel it out and get it back at that. And I'm so wrong about some things and right about other things that I don't even realize that all go back to the word. Whether it's CSGO, RTS games, Steam, Valve, Portal, familial relationships, the names of streets and cities, the way businesses are structured that I've participated in around me, like Walmart, Best Buy, retail stores and services, the food, logistics, Cisco networking, from satellites and technologies to the way you can understand your cellular anatomy, or the trajectory of developing patterns of all intellectual studies and positions, the expression of your own experiences of pool parties, which isn't something to be talked about, observed like a spectator watch, that has nothing to do with you, like you're just some peeping Tom trying to record yourself giving some important commentary as you observe all of these satanic porn rituals from behind a door that corrupt your imagination and disallow you to be of the service that you feel called to be, so that you are becoming the villain of your story and not the hero. And then as the villain, you just complain about being the villain instead of the hero, and you don't feel like there's any transformation, but you're like, I don't want to be any of these one people, I want to be something completely different. But a want to be different is not the actual being different of. You're just stating another want or a craving, but the cravings, like I said, even when you stop Dr. Pepper, then they become kombucha, even if you stop watching porn, then there's still Game of Thrones, and the continuance of improvement never ended. I stopped doing some things and thought that things were better, and didn't realize that stopping stuff and improving and progressing is a constant, continual journey, which I wasn't even aware of because of how much I had dipped into the unawareness that sin provides when you partake in it. And all of these things, I don't even know what it is that I'm saying exactly, and it's a very long video that then I will upload and put a title probably like the Israelites and the Egyptians in the wilderness or the deserts are complaining, and they looked and they weren't affected by the serpents anymore because it was this bronze serpent statue. When I read this stuff in the way that I'm reading it at the time that I'm reading it, it has so much meaning and implication about the actions I feel like I'm supposed to take, about the application of how I'm supposed to use the things that I'm thinking while I'm reading it in contextual reference to my life and how I should be interpreting it and letting it influence me and my path and design, all things considered. And so many times I feel completely permanently condemned that faith, mercy, grace, and all these things aren't available to me anymore, that they were gifts given that I lost because there's a cutoff age. There's a cutoff age, not for everyone, but within your own participant life. But then I'm proved wrong at the same time. I'm proved wrong where I think that, and then it's shown to me that that's not true exactly. I make mistakes and get humbled, and then there's new kind of opportunities of love, and it's not the pleasure that I thought I would get, or the ego or position or authority or kind of stage presence or attention or intellect or gift or skill or talent, but ends up being a different kind of connective tissue where you're just kind of feeling healthier and flowing and feeling like you're circulating and doing work that matters and is contributing and making positive values, and you're able to do it and provide and participate and be part of the going forward forces that are seemingly great and doing good things, and you're part of that, and it's nice and it's positive and it's not this complete negative state. And so it's a wonderful thing to be part of, and it happens. And there's like, well, being part of that is like being part of the promise, and that this promised land becomes a real place you're getting to, that you do constantly feel like you've strayed from disobedience, but that you can get back to constantly. Each day gives you a new opportunity to get back to it. And honestly, the whole entire time it has been, and that you're closer than your parents were because they stayed away for 40 years, so you feel late because you're 28 and didn't do it at 14, but they swerved for 40 years and you're swerving for 14 years. You don't want it to be 40 years. And so you're trying to get closer, and it's trying to help you get closer. And every day at night or something, you feel like you messed up and it's all curses and it's too late because of how you interpret the numbers and the meaning and the symbols of everything going on. And people are late, but they still seem to be on the way. And you have all of these questions that don't seem to be answered. And you feel like they would have been answered if you would have done things differently. And they're only unanswered because you did things that are going to prevent you from ever having an answer. And that so nothing's ever, you're always going to be in a you're always going to be perplexed in a perpetual state of perplexion because you're in a purgatory that's going towards a state of infernoism, but that's just a concept which is archaic, but archaic concepts are still real in these like divine overarching ways, but that you can't deny the ratio of cars to human has exactly improved, or that everybody has a phone, or that ratios do change and differ. There's things and perspectives of technology and the whole cultural scene that we participate in that change, but that people are still living in their own personal hells as individuals and experience personal hells. And there's even huge hell movements that you might not even be aware of because through the grace of others around you who have given you so much forward momentum from the beginning that you didn't realize you had to grow and survive and thrive and do well, because you were so kind of entrenched in the word that you have such an upper hand when it comes to the obedience of the God which commands you into an eternal state of blessings, which makes it so that you have all the fruits and you're part of the good tree of life, to where you don't got to worry or combat that thing, and you're kind of on the edge where you're like, do I have that or do I not? I know I could have, but I didn't have could have, or like how much of the grandiose is an actual selection to be more important than you think versus just a kind of state where you had a vision of what you could have done without the ability to, so you're having this weird rubber banding, slingshotting projection of anticipation and challenge for person, position, and self within this kind of societal difference where you have different differences, but also the demand on you is different too, where there's like a higher pressure and it seems like more was given but also less, and you're like, where do I stand? So it's just a continual state of confusion, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I've done these kinds of things before. I wish I had done more of this, because where it would lead to in a year is actually a better place than I'd be now. It's this kind of attention that actually kind of would have helped me earlier, but what is it now? Is it too late now or something? I'm not really sure. I don't really understand completely. And I just know a lot of potential is wasted, and there's a lot of special opportunities that felt like God's saying, this is your last chance. I've given you so many. There's not infinite chances. I've given you a lot. I've made it clear to you. It shouldn't be that difficult. I haven't made it difficult. I've given you everything you need. I'm rewarding your momentum and progress and punishing your decisions, which I'm making very obvious to you what those are. And it's not a big thing I'm asking of you. I'm meeting you where you are, and I'm giving you everything you're wanting and more that you've worked up your whole life because to want. And I would have liked for you to do it all these other times, because I made those even more rewarding, but I'm still making it rewarding. Whereas now it's like, oh no, all right, you're done. No, I gave you your chance, you're done. Okay, I gave you so many chances over and over and over and over again, giving you constantly more and more incentive, more and more reward, more and more reason to listen to me, and more punishment sensitive for sensitive smaller things. And now I'm no longer helping you or trying to support you. Now I'm just going to take you down. But even today, it's not like that exactly. It's similar to that, but those are ideas usually I see in hindsight. And the weaknesses are usually weaknesses that I'm not strong enough towards in hindsight, because of things that have stacked and dominoed and add up to this point. And it's these kind of actions that end up, it seems, to like protect me against those types of behaviors and characteristics. So yeah, it's a long video, but I don't know. Yeah. So, you know, it sucks. It feels like it's over. And it sucks. Right? But still, every day there's things I could do that feel like they will make really big and great changes. And that it's things like this that just take an hour that contribute and don't take away, even though I have doubt. So I guess I'll just keep doing that.